Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session brought to you by the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. We are excited to have you here today for an exciting seminar. We're gonna have some amazing bartenders who are gonna be making drinks, and we'll be talking about shochu and shochu cocktails. So without further ado, my name is Don Lee. I used to own a bar in New York City called Existing Conditions, and I'll be your moderator today. And I'm going to introduce our roundtable of amazing bartenders. So first up, we have Masa.
Hi, Don.
Hey, Masa.
Good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, so where are you at the moment, Masa, and where do you work?
I'm at the bar where I work in the New York City place called Katana Kitten in West Village of New York City.
Awesome. And then also with us, we have Ben.
Hey Don, hey everyone. I'm Ben Rojo. I also formerly owned a bar in the East Village called Black Emperor. I am at my apartment in Astoria right now.
Great. And joining us as well is AK Hada.
Hi everyone, how's it going? Until recently, I worked with Don Lee at Existing Conditions, but I most recently joined the team at Dante. I'm still based in New York, but I'm currently in Aspen, I'm the beverage director for one of their programs out here.
Great. And not last but not least, we have Takuma joining us from Japan, right?
Yes, how are you?
Excellent, how are you doing, Takuma?
Good, I'm in Japan now. I work at Angel Share. I'm a head bartender manager there. Yeah.
Great. So a little quick overview about what we'll be talking about. So we're talking about shochu. JSS is the Sake and Shochu Makers Association, but we'll be primarily talking about shochu today. Shochu is really interesting. There's really no other spirit quite like it for many different reasons. I think that the biggest thing that most people may not know about, but I think makes it the most interesting, is the way that you turn the starch into sugar. So in many spirits, you're starting with the starch, and then you need to unlock that starch into a sugar so that the yeast can then eat that sugar and then create the alcohol. Of course, then it goes on to be distilled, and then you make the final product. But that first step, how do you turn starch into sugar? And in most cases, what you're gonna usually have is you're just gonna either cook it, so you're letting the heat and time do its thing to break down those complex starches into the smaller sugar that the yeast can eat, or maybe you're using some kind of enzyme. And for those of you familiar with whiskey, you've probably heard of malted barley. So when you are malting barley, what you're doing is you're taking that barley seed and you're going to let it sit in water, get a little bit warm. It thinks it's spring, it's time to grow into a plant, into that grass, and it is going to naturally create an enzyme that converts the starch that's trapped in the seed to break it into a sugar so that the plant has something to eat and grow. So when you're making whiskey, you take that barley, you do this malting process, and then you're using this natural enzyme from the barley, from that malting process, and then that's how you unlock that sugar. Other more industrial processes, you'll just buy a chemical bag of enzyme. You can even go on Amazon right now, and for those of you who do home brewing, you'll know you can buy like an amylase enzyme, and then you can just, you can cook your whatever grain you're working with, add the enzyme, let it turn the starch into sugar. Shochu is really different, and also this is the process for many other products made in Japan, not just distilled products, but even food products like soy sauce and miso, where you're using a very special thing called koji. And koji, it is a mold. It is something that just naturally grows in the same way that yeast naturally grows. It's something that's just in the air all around us, but it is native to a specific region in Japan. And so in the same way that we talk about how when people are doing natural fermentation for other distilled products, they talk about how they use a specific yeast that's really unique to that area that provides those flavors. When we're talking about shochu, you have this extra step of using this mold, this koji that is grown to turn that starch into sugar. So shochu can be made from many different things. Most of us primarily think of it as being made from barley or from rice, but can also be made from sweet potato. Not the sweet potato we think of in America when we think of like a Thanksgiving and yam and that orange sweet potato, but really more of a white or purple sweet potato. If you've ever been to a sushi restaurant and you've had like a tempura assortment, the sweet potato you get in there that's not orange, that is the Japanese style sweet potato. And that is what is being used to make shochu. But whether you're using sweet potato or even something more exotic like carrot or something else, all of those things, or even if you're using sugarcane, if you're down in Okinawa, all of those products use koji. So by using this koji, you are adding another dimension of flavor that doesn't exist in any other distilled product. And it really is unique. And if you think about, the other places that you commonly find a koji that you're already familiar with, like I said, soy sauce or with miso, there's this level of savoriness that you don't really get in any other way. So those of you who may be into other like health kicks, you may have heard of like other aminos, like coconut amino, or if the people who make the most popular apple cider, you see like the Bragg's apple cider, you'll see like, the other aminos that they make. Those aminos that, that savory extra umami flavor comes naturally from things like koji. And so we'll often use, something like nutritional yeast in other forms of cooking when we're trying to add those savory elements. And those are things that you just don't get in any other distilled spirit because you don't use something like koji. And there are many other ways in which shochu is interesting, such as using vacuum distillation. Many of you have probably heard of people using rotovaps in their bar to do a distillation at a very low temperature by reducing the pressure using a vacuum. Well, people who are making shochu are using that at an industrial scale. So if you think of those giant stills that everyone uses to make their alcohol, imagine that, but like a rotovap, it is, you're pulling a vacuum on that, and you're able to get flavors and fragrances that you couldn't otherwise because you're doing it at a different temperature. So shochu is super interesting, a lot of different things that go into it. And we'll be doing other seminars in the future that get into the nitty-gritty about it. But this is just a little bit of an intro to get your, to whet your appetite, as it were, to get you interested in this very unique spirit. And with this unique spirit, we're going to have these bartenders make a drink, show us how they use it, and we'll be discussing why they use shochu, why they use the specific shochu that they use, and how they think about making cocktails generally, but specifically how they think about making shochu cocktails. So Masa, would you show us your cocktail and tell us what you're making and and how you came about in creating this cocktail for us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so today I'm making probably the most simplest cocktail amongst all the bartenders. I'm making chuhai variation. So chuhai is, if you go to Japan, casual restaurant, the place is called izakaya. So basically you finish your day's work and then just go out there and socialize, just, like order these little bit of food, and like the people start with the beer, highballs, the classic Japanese highballs with whiskeys. Also, there's an option called chuhai. So chuhai is very popular. So basically it's a shochu highball made up word. So chuhai, so basically shochu based and topped with the soda. That's classic chuhai that sometimes comes with the a slice of lemon or something like that. But today I'm making a little more kind of cocktail way that I'm adding like a touch bit of yuzu, citrus, and some sugar, which I made a syrup. So kind of so easy to make, but it carries really good flavor of this base shochu. I'm using it's called Mizuno Mai Shochu. It's from Saga Prefecture in Japan. And this one's got a little unique flavor of lemongrass as well. So this really nice, clean, classic shochu with the lemongrass, and that goes well with the citrusy notes of yuzu as well. So should I get start making this cocktail? Yeah, sure.
Let's make this drink. And
Great.
For anyone who's watching, if you have questions, please write it in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat, and I'll bring up those questions either with the individual bartenders or in the discussion at the end. So please go ahead and use that chat function. And the bartenders who are making the drinks, don't worry about the chat. You focus on making your drinks.
All right, sweet. I know my shirt looking a little bit tight, and it wasn't tight a year ago. So people might be thinking, oh, that shirt might be a little too tight on Masa, but it wasn't that tight a year ago. Anyway, so base ingredients. So I'm going to add 1.5 ounce of Mizunomai lemongrass. So this is 35% alcohol. So if you compare that to usual gin and vodka, any other white spirits, like comes a little over 40% alcohol. So it's just a touch bit softer as well. So I just added how much I added? 1.5 ounce of that, and then here comes the syrup. This is a salted yuzu sherbet. So it's kind of like a syrup that is great, that comes all 2-in-1. So like the sweetness and also acidity as well. And I added a touch bit of sea salt. So kind of a little bit sweet, sour, salty syrup. It just simply a pound, a lot of lemon peels in the white sugar, and sugar sucks up the lemon flavor, and then add yuzu juice, lemon juice, and just basically dissolve and strain it. So here comes the syrup. Now, nice and frosty mug. And top with the soda. And garnish with lemon wheel. So cheers. This is yuzu shio chuhai. So shio is Japanese. In Japanese is salt. So touch bit of salted yuzu lemon sherbet and Mizunomai lemongrass shochu. And cheers.
Great. So Masa, a couple of questions for people, if they might want to be trying to recreate this cocktail or a similar cocktail. So
Yes,
if you go to a Japanese grocery store and you're looking for yuzu, sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll be able to get it fresh, but probably you're going to get it bottled. And I know that sometimes you'll find ones that have salt already and some that don't have salt. So in this one, did you use a yuzu that had salt or that didn't have salt?
No, without salt. So if
Without
you go
salt.
to without salt. So if you go to Japanese grocery store, you see probably like different size and different category as well. Some are say like use vinegar to kind of use in purpose of for more cooking purpose, and others probably generally a bit more pricier, which is yuzu juice, the juice of yuzu, which we use in in the cocktails.
Okay, and then as far as this syrup goes, are you making it like a 1-to-1? Is it a 50 brick syrup or is it less than that?
Exactly. It's pretty much. So I do say just simply like 1,000 grams of sugar, and I use I'll use 850 grams of fresh squeezed lemon juice that after you peel the lemons, and 150 grams of yuzu juice, 100% yuzu juice, and then it's a little over 50%, I guess, because of the sugar from the lemon, but the yuzu juice quite nice and sharp, and the acidity has got the high acidity that kind of balances out. And yeah, I just tasted it. I think it tastes really good and simple. Something I guess I remember I was drinking in Japan as well, but made out of scratch and fresh.
Nice. And I know that at Katana Kitten, you make so many different kinds of highballs. It's kind of your signature drink there is making highballs. So from your experience, the order of operations that you made that drink, I saw that you mixed the shochu with your sherbet first, and then you put it into the mug. Do you find that just makes it so that it mixes better, or do you have any other tips for people who are just generally making highballs out there?
Yeah, thank you for noticing that, Don. So first of all, the Katana Kitten, the bar, this amazing bar is designed by one and only Don Lee. So it's first of all, it's an amazing place to work in. But this little tent, basically it's a milk pitcher for the coffees that you order a cup of coffee and then it comes on the side with the half and a half or creams. So I found this 4-ounce little thing. What we do at Katana Kitten, so I just saw that I put the shochu in and the syrup in, but at the same time, like we making five other highballs, different kinds of highballs when it comes to the real service. So it kind of like it controls the timing to serve everything fresh, and at the same time, like once you pull out the frozen mag out of the freezer, that start like defrosting. So to make it more consistent to deliver that like kind of frosty cold drink and different combination of the order, and to deliver the kind of frostiness and the freshness that I found this kind of works. So basically you first build, and then sometimes it contains like different type of juice as well. So kind of pre-mix in this little thing helps to makes it faster, but at the same time, like you don't have to stir that much in the once you top off with the soda, so you don't lose that carbonation. So kind of, I don't know, for some reason made sense to make this way.
Great. And then with this drink, you used 1.5 ounces of the shochu before you topped it with soda. Is that how you make all your highballs, or is that specifically when working with shochu, you used 1.5 ounces versus 2 ounces?
So yes, great question. So I'm trying to keep it like really kind of approachable and refreshing to people, and also that comes back to our cost as well. But yeah, great question. So to me, to compare shochu, I mean 35%, and if I compare that to similar distillate, I guess like White Dog, like 40% like White Dog or like white spirits. For some reason, to me, shochu carries that more nuanced flavors. So the honkaku shochu that like in Japan it comes in 25% alcohol, it's much more lower. And compare that to other spirits and kind of, I don't know, it's low proof, but carries almost same amount or more complex flavor that compared to other spirits. So even if it's like kind of 1/2 ounce short, that 2 ounce, I could have put 2 ounce, but the 1.5 ounce is kind of the refreshing body that I was looking for this specific highball. But without even like without that missing 1/2 ounce, so from 2 ounce to the 1.5 ounce, still not lacking the flavor of the shochu. So and carbonation that the soda helps to bring that out too.
All right, one last question for you before we move on to Ben and his cocktail. When sadly, most people aren't really looking for shochu cocktails first. We all love shochu and we love playing with it, but when that guest comes in who's never heard of shochu, right? When would you suggest this cocktail? If they come in and they don't know anything about any cocktails and they're just kind of looking at your menu, how do you know, how do you recommend this cocktail to who are you suggesting this?
I guess to everyone, basically it's really a no-brainer cocktail that it's refreshing and it's a great drink to start off with. And I guess anyone likes like gin and tonic, like vodka soda, that anyone likes that kind of, I don't know, refreshing cocktail. I'd love to recommend to everyone. And instead of start off with I'll get the beer, or like when it's hot out, and but there's something that and the taste is very simple but satisfied all the kind of, I guess, everyone's tasting buds. It's a sweet, it's not too sweet, but the balanced sweetness and then citrusy and a touch bit of salty that kind of like makes you want to drink more, and the kind of nuanced flavor of this beautiful shochu. So I think it's a great drink for everyone.
Great, thanks, Masa.
Thank you, Don.
All right, Ben, tell us about your cocktail and show us what you've got.
Thanks, Don. Today I'm making a cocktail I'm calling Smoldering, not unlike the look Masa gives from across the bar. I'm going to be featuring Ikomon, which is like an Emo Shochu, like a sweet potato shochu from Kagoshima. This is like kind of piggybacking off of what Masa was just talking about. Like this is a Honkaku shochu that 25% alcohol. I'll be using it pretty liberally in this cocktail. Let me see if I'll switch the angle up a little bit so you guys can see my hands. So the inspiration of this cocktail is twofold. One of it is the it's not quite done steeping. The inspiration of this cocktail is kind of like a yakiimo, which is like the same sweet potatoes you were mentioning earlier. Kind of like roasted whole and like kind of like a nice warm treat in the wintertime. And the second inspiration is oyuari, which is another classic way to consume shochu, which is simply paired with hot water. And this one I'll be doing a Hojichak tea instead, and a little bit of a twist from there on. This looks about ready.
Can you explain to folks what a Hojichak tea is?
Oh yeah, of course. I think actually, Dom, maybe one of the last times maybe not one of the last times I saw you, but like years ago, I feel like you proctored a tea seminar that Nana and I presented at. Well, once upon a time. But Hojicha is like it's a roasted green tea that differs from other types of like kind of like maybe like a more traditional like Chinese roasted green tea in that like it's still steamed and dried before being roasted, so it halts the oxidation process. So it kind of like preserves a lot more of the kind of top notes and like a little bit more of a delicate aroma than other roasted teas. So I've got about 90 milliliters here, brewed pretty darkly. And while with oyuari, I guess the traditional ratio is somewhere about 3 parts shochu to 2 parts hot water, and that's more or less how I usually take it. And this one, since the tea is kind of full flavored, and the ikomon, actually I drew some inspiration from one of your cocktails, Don. I think the Benton's Old Fashioned was probably the cocktail that put fat washing on the map. It was probably a decade ago the first time I had one. This one is, so I've done basically infused this with a little bit of brown butter, because the base shochu, like it's super robust, super aromatic. I guess Emo Shochu in particular within other shochu category, among like different varieties, different fermentation bases, like it tends to retain a lot of oil. I guess it has a lot of oil, super aromatic. It's like really kind of like a great one to have with hot water. So yeah, so I added I just infused with brown butter in the kind of fat washing style you pioneered, just to kind of like reinforce a lot of that like richness and body that I think is already like here in spades. I'm not often bartending sitting down, so this is a little bit of a weird frame. Okay, keep this in over here. And to this, I will add just a bar spoon. If I was I'd probably about 5 grams of Natsume honey. And this is like, Natsume is just like, or jujube fruit. So this one is actually, this is a really great one. It's like I guess this one's made in Korea, but it's basically, they take ripe Natsume or jujube fruit and stew it slowly, and then cook it down with honey until it's like super fragrant and kind of like dark and candied. And it's this will just kind of like augment the earthiness that's already kind of like at the heart of this cocktail.
For those of you unfamiliar with that, it's kind of like it's similar to a date, but when we think of dates, they tend to be super sugary. This is going to be a little bit more like herbal and aromatic, but kind of in that same date family.
Okay, and then it's like a much different drink with a similar application. I'm just gonna add a pinch of sea salt to this to kind of, you know, tie all the flavors together and really kind of reinforce the sort of savory backbone afforded by both the shochu and the butter. One more stir. And to that, I'm just going to garnish with a whole dried natsume or jujube. And what this will do is as it steeps in the hot cocktail, it'll take on a lot of the flavors of the drink while also kind of like continuing to infuse like a little bit more earthiness and kind of like dark colored flavors into the drink. And so there you have it. This is the smoldering. Cheers.
Great. So this is great to see making one cocktail, but how would you do this, in service? Would you make the tea in batch, have it hot hold, or like, using like a press pot? How would you, use this at a bar?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a big consideration, and it's certainly in terms of dealing with volume. Tea, I found, it's inescapable that like once it's brewed, it'll like immediately start to kind of like oxidize and degrade. But for this purpose, I guess using a controlled temperature, basically with Hojicha, to preserve a lot of those top notes anyway, you'd want to hold it. I mean, you're brewing it with sub-boiling water anyway. So depending on like the volume and like you could probably get away with brewing a batch and keeping it in like a sort of like a vacuum thermos for a little while. Like, I mean, if you made a few servings, so I'd probably do that. If it was like an event or something like that, I would probably do like a big one of those camping thermoses with the dispensers. Because as long as it's like kind of airtight and like temperature controlled, most of the flavors will persist. If I was doing it someone in my house, I'd probably brew to order, and that's what I'm doing right now. But yeah, I think outside of that, for the day service, I definitely I believe the brown butter shochu and the honey you could sort of batch in a single bottle, and it would maintain its integrity. And then that would just be like a two pickup thing. The tea being the longest factor. Yeah, I don't know. Was that like
Yeah, that answers the question. Is tea an ingredient that you use a lot? Is it an ingredient that you specifically like with shochu, or
I would say yes, in like very different capacities. And in general, I mean, I feel like you and I have talked about this before, but for everyone at home, like I think tea is like such a fascinating well to draw from, just because like it adds so much. I mean, for one, there aren't, I mean, it's like fantastic and varied in terms of like the sort of tannin profiles that it offers. So like in any drink you put it in, it'll add structure, and like that sort of bitterness will often like balance like sort of the other aspects of the drink, particularly sweet. And I mean, I think there's just like something really like distinctly aromatic about most teas that I'm very keen on. And I mean, I don't know, it's something that in my mind from like a young age I've always sort of associated with like having people over or some sort of hospitality. So maybe there's like some of that at play as well.
In terms of people who maybe haven't heard of this style of service, of having shochu with just hot water, is that something that you want to introduce people to? Is that something that you've seen people enjoy when they have it? What's your experience with that in America? As for most people who may not have heard of that before.
I think it's something that it isn't super widespread yet for me. And like in these winter months, I mean, I think hot drinks enjoy like more and more popularity every winter, it would seem. I mean, I don't know. They think if you have a hot drink on the menu when it's cold out, it's safe to say that it'll probably be moving. for Oyuwari specifically, I think I first got into the habit when I was like 20 or something like that, in like a karaoke room in Midtown somewhere. And it's one of those things where, like, I guess I was kind of stuffy, and my friend Midori told me that, like, oh yeah, you should drink Oyuwari, it'll like help open you up. And not that like it didn't improve my voice, but I felt better. And like for me, it's just, I guess it's like a very any hot drink, but Oyuwari specifically, I think hot water opens up shochu in a way that's really helps kind of plumb the depths of everything that it has to offer, speaking to like the processes you mentioned before, from back distillation to like koji, and like the fact that also all shochu is like single distilled by law. So a lot of that sort of like a lot of those like amino acids and sort of other congeners, they persist through distillation. And it's one of those things where like you get all these kind of like nuanced aromatics, and I think maybe more than most things that shochus tend to display tastes and flavors and aromas and characteristics of the like the grain base or the sugar base that they come from. So for me, Oyuwari is, I mean, just like an awesome way to kind of like really dig into a shochu, especially if you like it.
Great. And then one last question about the shochu you used. Do you know if what the proof on that is?
The Ikoman is 50 proof. So it's like, it's pretty standard Honkaku bottling. So it's like, which is great because like you can use a ton of it. Oh, not a ton. Like you can use a generous amount of it. And so, and you can, and it's so full flavored, and it's got such body. But it's, you can session a few of these cocktails without like, worrying about having to, if you can if you can successfully call a lift home or not.
Great. Thank you, Ben. All
Thanks,
right.
Son.
So for the next cocktail, we have AK. What do you have for us, AK?
Potentially.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I actually have two cocktails, and I don't have the bottles to display because what I've learned being in Colorado is that overnight shipping means 2-week shipping. So, but I am lucky to have the samples here. So I have two shochus from Miyazaki, the Miyazaki prefecture. The first one is called Kappa no Sosoi Mizu, and it's a Emo Shochu. So we're talking about that Japanese style sweet potato again. And this one is actually even lower. It's 40 proof or 20% ABV. And in general, when I think of shochu, I think shochu to me tends to be really aromatic on the nose and more subtle on the palate. So the type of cocktails I feel like they tend to lend to are martinis or highballs or hot drinks like Ben just did. I'm also, so I'm a hapa. My dad is Japanese, my mom is American, and I'm probably I think I'm the only person on the panel who has not been to Japan. So after the pandemic, then it's on the list. But so most of my cocktail inspiration and cocktail knowledge and experience has been from New York City. So the first one, Kappa no Sazoi, I find tastes a lot like, it reminds me of like orchard fruit. So I get a lot of like pear and apple. Kappa, when I was doing some research on the name, was a nod to a water demon that lures women. So I think it was meant to be a little bit more of a feminine spirit relatively in the world of shochu. So it does have lots of like floral fruit notes. It made me think of a classic Audrey Saunders cocktail, Falling Leaves, which is Riesling based. So it's a low ABV martini style drink that I just feel like really is perfect for this. So first I'm gonna start with 2 dashes of cardamom bitters. And I made a barley tea syrup in-house. Barley also is a pretty subtle flavor, but I think I remember having it as a tea, and it always made me feel like really comforting. So I cold steeped a 10% barley tea in the fridge for 24 hours. And then I added sugar to bring it up to 50 bricks. So that's a pretty simple tea cordial. I have half an ounce of curacao. I'm also going to add, fortify this with just a little bit of Calvados. So this is Lemorton Calvados, French apple brandy. And then I'm going for 1.5 ounces of the shochu. I'm also bartending sitting down, and you're right, Ben, it is weird. And this probably, we're just going to do a quick stir because, again, this is very low ABV. And I'm going to garnish this with, here in Aspen, we have these beautiful pine trees. So in the Miyazaki region, they specifically Nichinan City, where this distillery is, Obi cedar is a big industry there. So I think that, again, I just want to bring out like the aromatics and the subtlety and the nuance and the regionality of the shochu. So this is my martini called Hidden Parts.
Great. So before we move on to your second cocktail, let's talk about this one a little bit. You've got a lot of things going on here. And I think for a lot of people, when they first start playing with shochu, they're kind of afraid to step on the flavor of it. They think, oh, it's a white spirit. It doesn't have anything else in it like a gin. So they're kind of afraid to mix other things into it. Otherwise, you might lose the shochu. So when you're making this drink, how did you think about that? And how did you come with this combination of flavors?
Well, I think the way that I approach cocktails in general is, and definitely the way I was trained at PDT is you start with your base spirit, and you nose it, you taste it, and I take notes, like what comes to me, so that's where I start first of all. And, because just because it doesn't have additional botanicals or oak influence like other more westernized spirits that we're all a little more familiar with, there is a ton of flavor and a ton of smell that I think comes from the distillation process and the koji fermentation. So, even if it, you can't pinpoint, oh, this has juniper, coriander, and this, there is a lot that can be built upon. Because it is lower ABV, I would treat this in a cocktail maybe more as you would a wine. So again, I think stirred cocktails, highballs, pretty much, I think for the lower ABV shochus, anything without citrus is where I come from. To me, this, I get really orchard notes. So that's why I went with the Calvados and the Curacao just to bring that out. The barley tea just to add a little bit of like warmth and roundness as my sweetener. And keep it simple, is really I think the go-to here.
Great. And that's a roasted barley tea, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But the shochu that you used was an Emo Shochu, so a sweet potato shochu.
It is. So I'm kind of crossing lanes there a little bit. But yes, this is an Emo Shochu.
Yeah, that's very cool because now you're layering all these different flavors together, and you're bringing all these things together. I really want to taste that cocktail. So what's your second cocktail for us?
So my second cocktail, I went for more of a spritz style. When I was a kid, I remember I loved the smell of coffee way before I was old enough to drink it. And my mom would take me to a coffee shop and she would let me have Italian sodas. And the first one that I had was just orgeat and soda water. And it was like, as an 8-year-old, like, wow, this is amazing. I swear I wasn't a snob as an 8-year-old, but So I'm going to build this drink. My second shochu is called Yanagita Alkagi. And this is a migu shochu, so a barley shochu. And this is also 50 proof or 25%. And when I first smelled this, it's really, I would say it's really rich and oily. It still drinks very light, but it has really distinct, like toasty, almost smoky notes. I think the koji is attached directly onto the barley. So it really brings out a lot of like umami in this. So this is quite a savory shochu. So this is my base. I'm gonna do 2 ounces. I just have a 1/4 ounce of coffee liqueur. I made a homemade chestnut orgeat. In a lot of your Japanese grocery stores in the sort of sweets or pastry aisle, you can find various different like nut pastes. So I found this chestnut orgeat that I just mixed with a little bit of water and a little bit of sugar, again, to bring it to 50 bricks. This, I think, is going to bring a lot of nuttiness. As a tiny bit of a lengthener, I have some Oloroso sherry. So I'm just going to give this a quick stir. And I'm going to top this off with soda, probably like 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces, about the same amount as the shochu. And I'm going to garnish with an orange twist. There you go. Cheers.
Great. So both of your cocktails, you went, unlike the first 2 cocktails we saw, really more in that traditional style of cocktails when you go to, the modern style of cocktail bars. So not specifically looking at a existing, traditional Japanese serve, but looking at, kind of what else is happening in the cocktail world. When you are thinking about shochu, where does that fit, when you look at other cocktails that, just in terms of the classic cocktails, as well as the kind of cocktails you see generally that aren't made from shochu? Like, how does that fit in the larger pantheon?
I mean, I think that with shochu, because of just its uniqueness, its ABV, you really, I don't want to say you can't necessarily go for the Mr. Potato Head style of mixology, like what classic cocktail does this fit in? But I think that in terms of building drinks, you're still balancing sweetness, acidity, savoriness, saltiness, all of the above. So, you can only draw from personal experience, I guess. And so most of my personal experience has been in more like classic style cocktails. So I guess that's where my framework comes from. And then I adjust based on the individual base spirit, which again is at a lower ABV. And I want to think of modifiers and lengtheners that are going to complement versus cover, which is a little more tricky just because it's at a lower proof, but certainly not impossible and certainly delicious and manageable.
Yeah. Do you have any other tips when thinking about that? How do I make a lower ABV thing? A lot of people I feel are afraid to use the lower ABV shochus because they're like, it just doesn't have as much oomph compared to the high ABV ones.
I think it depends on like what venue you're mixing in as well. Like would I pick my first cocktail, at a high volume kind of party bar? No, probably not, but would I sip on it in a cocktail bar? Absolutely. So I think you have to think of your setting and what is your guest doing when they're enjoying this drink. And I think that there's nothing to be scared about. They're all still very familiar flavors. There's certainly other when you think of like baijiu and some other like very, very potent spirits coming from Asia, I think maybe sometimes those are different or maybe more unique flavors to balance in traditional style cocktails. But shochu, if anything, is just a little more subtle, but definitely approachable.
Great, thank you. And so next, we got a couple of cocktails from Takuma, but I believe you pre-recorded a couple of videos. So we'll be seeing 2 videos that you made for your cocktails. Do you want to tell us anything before we see the videos?
Yeah, like so unfortunately I cannot make a cocktail here. So like, please watch it.
Great, so let's see those videos.
Yes.
Hi guys, my name is Takuma from Indonesia. Today I'm going to use Towari, which is soba shochu made with 100% buckwheat from Miyazaki. And what is soba is? Soba is a very typical iconic noodle from Japan. When I eat soba, so I always eat with the mentsuyu, which is noodle soup, and the trimmings. Today I'm going to make cocktail called 100% Sabatini. So I'm going to creating this dish into a cocktail using those ingredients. Yeah. So let's make it. Look at the eyes. Water. Stir. So first, Towari shochu, 75 ml. And the mentsuyu, 10 ml. And this one, so this one is cooked with the nori and the maple syrup together. Nori is seaweed. So nori, maple syrup, 15 ml. That's it. And so this one is a wasabi and the yuzu salt. I'm gonna leave it. So let's stir. So 100% Sabatini. Enjoy.
Great, and I think we have one more video.
Yes.
Now this time I'm going to use the Ichiko, which is most iconic Japanese berry shochu from Oita. So I'm going to create a cocktail called the Oita Fizz, which is using a specialty from Oita. Yeah. So let's make it. So this one is 150 ml of milk, and the using kabosu. Kabosu is a Japanese citrus. Dirty milk. Mix together. And with the kinako, with the strainer and the kitchen paper, 3 tablespoons, and the strainer. So it takes about 30-40 minutes. So I already made it. This one is the kabosu kinako milk, which is already for wash. Nice. Make a show. Go. Ichiko. $45 ml. The kabosu milk kinako. $75. The simple syrup. 15. Let's shake it. Soda. The Oita Fizz. Enjoy.
Great. So many interesting things to talk about here, Takuma. First of all, I'm glad that you made a shake and drink, because so far we've only seen built and stirred drinks. We had a question earlier where somebody asked if shochu is really better just to stir, and I'm glad you showed a shake and drink. But let's start with your first drink, with your sobatini. So interesting. When I saw first of all, I'm glad you explained what soba is. So most people, you probably heard of it as a dish. Glad you showed the noodles. But when I saw what you were doing, the first thing it made me think of is when you go to a traditional like soba, restaurant, at the end of your meal, they'll bring you the water that the noodles have been cooked in, and then kind of how you have that at the very end with the soup base that you have left over. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that traditional service of just the noodle, and then kind of how that relates to your cocktail?
So yes, the the soba is like one of the traditional like thin noodles, which made from the buckwheat. Um, so we very like eat often the soba. So like when you go to Japan, like you can see a lot of like soba place in Japan, and the when I see that the toari, the shochu, so that was like I feel like 100% like soba flavor, like it's beautiful soba flavor, and I thought like oh, I have to create like 100% soba flavor, which is like including the like trimming and the also the mentsu as well, like dipping noodle soup, yeah. So then like
So,
yeah.
Is soba like tea something that you work with ever in cocktails, or is it just you like the soba distillate that you work with?
That's so. What do you say? What do you say?
Have you ever made cocktails using like a soba tea, the buckwheat tea?
It's actually I never made with that soba tea, but so like when I taste the soba, like that tobari shochu, so I got some image that like that, oh, I want to create some like 100% soba flavor. So like eventually like I create that cocktail.
Have you ever thought about making that as a hot drink? Because you can have soba both hot and cold.
It's actually like it's maybe like if I made a hot cocktail with that, like be awesome. Like I can imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah, seems very interesting. And then for your second drink, so you basically kind of made a la minute shaken milk punch almost, right?
Right. The milk punch. Like it takes about like 20, 30 minutes to like clarify, but it's like kind of not like very thick milk. It's very like kind of easy type drink.
Right. So
Mm.
when you added the citrus juice to the milk, you're
Mm.
intentionally curdling it. You want the milk to become chunky, and then when you filter that out, you get just the you're separating the curds in the whey, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
And then the kinako, which is it's the soybean powder. I think most people maybe have had it on the outside of like mochi. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
sweet and savory, right? And then you're almost treating that like coffee, in that you're doing like almost this like kinako like pour over using the
Mm-hmm.
milk.
Right. It has like kind of like a very like unique flavor. So you can just feel like the kinako. Also like when I went to the Oita, like I tried all the flavors, the kinako and the Japanese citrus, which is the kabosu. Yeah. So it's all from Oita. So that's why I call Oita Fizz.
So when you made that drink as a fizz and as a shaken drink, is there
Mm-hmm.
something that you specifically are like, okay, I need to think about these things when I make a shaken shochu drink that's different from a stirred drink? Or is it, you can shake it just like any other cocktail?
So when you shake the shochu, of course, like it makes like kind of like a light fluffy texture. Like if you wanna make like more kind of like body like shochu, like a real shochu kind of like texture, like I would love to stir. So
So
this
it's
time like
primarily
I love to make like a fluffy, like kind of like a pop like shochu flavor. So that's why I shake it.
great. Well, I think that we're going to just get everyone together now, and let's all have a discussion about kind of how you think about cocktails, how you think about shochu, and where it fits in with everything else. I think that the first thing I would say, looking at everybody's cocktail, everyone had a savory element to your drinks, and very often that's not the case when you think about most cocktails. I think that when you ask the average person, like, name a savory cocktail, maybe they'll say a margarita because it has salt on it. But, every one of you, and I don't think anyone told you make a savory drink. Is anyone have any thoughts on like why shochu, why savory specifically, or was it just kind of a happy coincidence that you all did something savory?
I mean, I think chiming in, I think there's something to be said about like the almost like sort of like a culinary influence that everyone can kind of intuitively draw from, just because so much like shochu has such a flavor of like the food that it comes from. Like, you know, going back to what we mentioned, what we talked about, your introduction and all that. But I don't think, yeah, none of us talked about it ahead of time, but I think that's like, I think there's like a little bit of a natural pivot in that direction, just given how much shochu tastes like what it comes from.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you know, maybe we think about when describing the difference between bourbon and rye, you know, we'll explain corn versus rye to folks, but no one really talks about, you know, the base product in other spirits that much. And certainly, you know, from my experience, even with a vodka, you know, I can maybe tell the difference, you know, as a professional, like, oh, this is a potato vodka or a wheat vodka, but I don't think any, you know, guest would taste it and be like, oh, this is wheat, right? Whereas shochu is very different in that respect. You know, when you have the soba shochu, it's very obviously soba, you know, and you can't imagine anything else.
I think so much of that does come from the distillation process. And I think, you know, maybe in bigger cocktail hubs, more and more people are becoming more familiar with, you know, atmospheric distillation or low pressure distillation. But it does tend to capture the essence of the raw ingredient a little more. I think, you know, when you think of something like a bourbon or rye or scotch, like the process that it goes through from fermentation and then heating it up and then aging it, you know, we can talk about the difference between corn versus rye, but this is, you know, barley and sweet potato and rice, etc., in its essence, I think.
So for people who, you know, don't necessarily have shochu already at their bar and they're interested, they want to start. What do you guys think in terms of, you know, what's the first shochu you need to have at a bar? You know, obviously, you know, it's not going to be like, I'm starting a program, I'm going to buy 10 different things and I need to have every single kind. Should they think about the ABV? Should they think about the region? Should they think about the product that it's distilled from? Like, if you had to start a new program, there's no shochu yet, what's the first thing you would get?
Yeah, I think Ichigo has the Saitan is at 40% ABV. So I think if you're a new bartender, you know, a bartender new to shochu, you know, perhaps that one is a good entry level because it is at a similar ABV to other spirits. So you can sort of get used to working with the flavors of shochu, but at a more approachable ABV. But really, I'm sure I would just say talk to your representatives and try to sample as much as you can and see what inspires you.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on what AK said, I think I mean, there's such idiosyncrasy in the category that like finding out what inspires you will probably best serve your guests. You know what I mean? Like, I'd say, I feel like if there's a style of shochu that you like, or if there's a particular bottling that you like, I mean, I'm probably more a Mugi guy than anything else, but I mean, and if I was to choose one for a program that I was doing, then I would do that. But that's just because I like to drink it, you know? So I think it's like whoever's in charge of designing it, or I think it's like what inspires you or what you like is probably the best jumping off point for that.
Masa, you know, you have a bar that is, you know, it's Katana Kitten. People come thinking that it's a Japanese bar. You know, how many shochus do you carry?
We don't carry that many. So at Katana Kitten, we have these. So this is something AK just introduced, the Ichigo Saitan. I really like this shochu. Simply, you can swap this to tequila and then gin and any other white spirits to create a classic cocktail that you expect, like from margarita, martini, and then you can just like make a fizz and any type of the cocktail. So this is 43. Sorry, excuse me. Yes, 43 alcohol, 43%
43%.
alcohol. Yes, 43% alcohol. And then again, it's bold shochu, but like still get the nuance from koji, and then the shochu nuance, but like still got the alcohol body. So you can mix with the exactly same, almost same proportion as any other base spirit. So let's make sour, you know, that in the same, just swap that base spirit and then still tastes delicious. And we also have earlier, I using my highball, that's the Mizu no Mai lemongrass rice shochu. We have that. So these are more like making cocktail that like we are familiar with. But we also have these honkaku shochu. So one is the rice shochu, one is sweet potato shochu. I think, how do you say it, don't it, like, you know, where, I don't know, you know, you go to France, in the southern France, and you pair that certain local food with the local wine, and they're kind of the similar thing. And then eating Japanese food, and katana kitten is more like bar food, but definitely has an essence and definitely the traditional flavor, authenticity to any of our bar food. Every single bar food we serve. And then just simply drinking these honkaku shochu, 25% alcohol. These honkaku shochu are simply on the rocks, you know, and then you get to experience that, I guess, like a Japanese izakaya experience. You know, you just go there and order some skewers and just sip on this. And again, the 25% low ABV. So, you know, if you make it on the rocks and then, you know, slowly sip, and you can have like 2 or 3 of those while you enjoy your food. So we don't really have that many selection here at Katana Kitten, but this is something we think that great to have on the back shelf. So you get to experience as what it is. And then also these are great to use in cocktails as well.
And Takuma, how about for you at Angel Share? You know, it's obviously more of a classic style bar, but people definitely think it, you know, that's a Japanese style classic cocktail bar. What is your experience in the kinds of shochu you carry, and then the expectation of the guest when they get there? Are they surprised when they see like a cocktail that uses shochu? Is that something where you have to convince them to try it because they've never heard of it? You know, what is the kind of the expectation of the guest versus, you know, what you have to do as a bartender to explain shochu?
So actually, like we don't have much like shochu as well, but yeah, we definitely, like same as Masa-san, like we carry the Ichiko Saiten, also the Mizuno Mai, and the so fortunately, like, you know, we have a, like right next to it's called Yokocho, is a izakaya restaurant, so they have tons of like shochu and sake. So that's why, like, you know, when customer order, like, so we borrow from there. So they have a tons of, like, you know, the shochu. And the so basically, like, the in Japan as well, it's the sweet potato shochu and the barley shochu is the most common like shochu. We usually drink, like, you know, like easily find, like, you know, like barley shochu, so sweet potato shochu. So like, so I'm like simply can use, because of maybe like the barley shochu flavor is similar to like kind of vodka. It's not exactly vodka, but it's like, you know, it's like similar like flavor notes. Also, like sweet potato shochu, it's not same, but it's like same as rum, like kind of like a sweet, like a fruity notes. So like I always like think about it, like, you know, always like creation with that like kind of inspiration. Yeah.
Great. And then, you know, question kind of open for anyone who wants to talk about this. You know, when you think about shochu, because it is a Japanese product, I think maybe some people might be afraid to try making a drink with it because they're afraid of making a, you know, an Asian drink, a Japanese drink, especially if they're not Asian or they don't have any ties to Japan. You know, it's weird. If you just Google Japanese cocktail, you get this, this like cognac drink that Jerry Thomas made. What does that have to do with Japan? Something about an ambassador in New York, maybe, but like, when all of these drinks, you guys all went specific into the region, to the kind of food it pairs with, what it reminds you of. For people who may not have that background, what do you suggest? Or is it like tequila where you don't have to make a Mexican drink, you can just make a drink? What do you think about shochu in that context?
I mean, I think the more, even if you're not familiar, or I can speak from experience. I've never been to these regions. I've never been to this place. I certainly grew up eating and drinking a lot of, Japanese food, but I think, a lot can be learned from each individual spirit. And just because it's not, like my first drink, I used a French apple brandy and French curacao. So I think it doesn't have to just be pigeonholed to, I have a Japanese spirit, I have to make a Japanese drink. But your drinks are always going to be more thoughtful, and I think more balanced, the more you know about the spirit and where it comes from. So same thing with tequila or mezcal or, any European spirit. The more you know about its origins, the more intelligent I think you can put together a drink, even if you're not necessarily pairing it with other Japanese ingredients.
Yeah, I think that like it's a salient point to think about, to consider I guess the question of appropriation, especially given like, the climate that we're in. But I don't know. I mean, to put it succinctly, I was cocktailing with Scotch before I'd ever been to Scotland, probably before I'd ever, really hung out with a Scottish person. I think that like in the nature of spirits, and shochu in particular is one of like conviviality. So I think it's made to be enjoyed by like a wide variety of people in a wide variety of contexts. So I mean, I think that like while being sensitive to like cultural considerations is always a good thing, I think that like, it's like I think that there's no reason to police or gatekeep yourself from playing in a sandbox with this stuff, just because you feel like you don't know enough about where it comes from. Because I mean, that's a problem that's easily solvable with the internet that we all have access to. And also I think like appreciating like this beautiful tradition of distillation, sort of in a vacuum, separating the art from the artist, if you will, I think is something that like is worth doing. Yeah.
Great. So we're just gonna start wrapping things up. I know we have a couple more questions from the chat. If you have any last minute questions, throw it in there right now. So a question from, I think this was from Christopher. Do you think shochu will become more popular in cocktail bars?
I hope so. Yeah.
I think so too. I hope so too.
I think we all love shochu, so we would love to see it become more popular in cocktail bars. But it kind of feels like it's up to those of you that are watching this. If all of you start making shochu cocktails at your bar, it will become popular. So you have the power to make it popular, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love to use it.
And then a question about carbonated cocktails. Has anyone tried making a batched carbonated cocktail using shochu? Does it work well? Does it not work well? Any thoughts on that?
Well,
Okay, after you. Okay.
I wasn't. Go ahead.
I think for a lot of the same reasons that shochu works well in like hot cocktails. I think it's in terms of like the volatility of a lot of the like aromatic components of it. Like I think that like carbonated I mean, I guess there are considerations that you'd make with any batched cocktail that's carbonated in terms of like, you know, how they would degrade over time. But I think shochu in particular, and then particularly in terms of like given the lower alcohol content, I think it's a considerable consideration. But I think because shochu as a category is so aromatically driven, that it definitely tends to work super well in carbonated cocktails, like Masa's Chuhai, for instance. Like I think there's a reason that's so popular is because like all that stuff you can smell in the beautiful nose and aroma and like different shochus and stuff like that. It's showcased further when you have this sort of like effervescence that's kind of bringing everything up to your nose.
And it could be said for the hot cocktail, right? Once you heat it up, it's starting to vaporize. You're getting more of that aroma.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
AK, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, Ben and I were on the same wavelength.
Great. One last question from Eli about the sweet potato shochu. Wants to know if it can be found somewhere in Brooklyn. I think Maxwell was in the chat. Maybe you have specific venues. Eli, I think when you gave us your email address when you signed up for this, maybe it's something that we can follow up with you specifically. But all of this stuff is fairly available, especially if you're in New York City, but certainly everywhere else in the United States or wherever you might be in the world. So the internet could be anywhere. A couple of advice for you that I would have is definitely go out and try this. And as Takuma said, you know, even in cocktail bars that are using it, they might not have the widest selection. So if you want to try a lot, you might want to just go to a Japanese restaurant. Go to an izakaya, you know, if you haven't heard that term before, it's a style of bar, you know, kind of think of it as like in the way that when you think of a pub, you know, that's a place where you have both food and drinks. An izakaya is not that look and feel, but in that same way, it implies it's a place where you're gonna, you know, hang out and eat and drink at the same time. So go to those places, certainly go alone, go with friends once there's a, you know, a vaccine, once the pandemic is over, but also, you know, don't just look at your reps from distributors and from the brands in terms of come to my bar and taste me on these things. You definitely want to taste them on their own, but you also really want to taste them in the context of how it's served, you know, traditionally, you know, in an izakaya style setting. So try to lean on those folks to take you out to a place, you know, they're their accounts, they've got budget to spend. Once the vaccine is out and people are going to want to go back out, there will be people looking to, you know, to do these spends in bars and in these restaurants. So use that opportunity to go educate yourself. Have, you know, liquor reps, have brands, have the distributors take you to the accounts that they have their products and try it in the context of eating and drinking, not just in the sterile, I'm going to nose this in a glass and, you know, try to analyze it. Really experience it in the way that most people in Japan do, and it'll give you a different perspective. Any closing thoughts from anyone else from our panel today?
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, big thanks to JSS. Big thanks to a lot of the other people that you might not recognize that are attending, are folks that work on the production or the distribution side of shochu. Really reach out to them. If you have questions, certainly reach out to JSS. They really, you know, they are an impartial body that's just trying to promote the entire category. They are not working for a specific brand. They don't have an agenda. They're really just excited to share this thing with you because they're super passionate about it and because it's so interesting. And as you can tell, I'm super passionate and interested in it. Please, you know, ask me questions. You can hit me up on social media, or, you know, if you ever see me in public once there's a vaccine again. Let's talk about shochu and let's share a glass over some great bar food at places like Katana. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and hope everyone stays safe in 2021.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, everybody.